Hello, I'm AUSTINE BAGUIOS from OV16. The theory that I choose and the topic that we learn is Unit 3, Lesson 3B, Information Processing Theory. First, we must know what is information processing. Information processing theory is a cognitive theory that focuses on how information is encoded into our memory. The theory describes how our brains filter information from what paying attention into the present moment to what gets stored in our short-term or working memory and ultimately into our long-term memory. Also, we must know of the history of information processing theory, developed by American psychologists including George Miller in the 1950s. In fact, those who program and design computers aim to make computers problems through processes similar to that of the human mind. The input is the information we give the computer or to our brain, while the CPU is linked to our short-term memory, and the hard drive is our long-term memory. Types of knowledge: general versus specific. This involves whether knowledge is useful in many tasks or only in one. Declarative involves that knowing that something is the case, that J is 10th letter of the alphabet, that Paris is the capital of France. Declarative knowledge is conscious, it can often be verbalized. Metalinguistic knowledge is knowledge about linguistic form is declarative knowledge. Procedural involves knowing how to do something, ride a bike for example. We may not able to explain how we do it. Procedural knowledge involves implicit learning which a learner may not be aware of, and may involve being able to use a particular form to understand or produce language without necessarily being able to explain it. Episodic. An episodic memory is a memory of a specific event because each person has a different perspective and experience of an event. Episodic memory of that event are unique to each person. Lastly, conditional. This is about knowing when and why to apply declarative or procedural knowledge strategies. We must also know what is memory. Memory is an information processing system that we often compare to a computer. Memory is the set of processes, processes used to encode, store, and retrieve information over different periods of time. Encoding involves the input of information into the memory system. Storage is the retention of the encoded information. Retrieval, or getting the information out of memory and back into awareness, is the third function. Three primary stages in information processing theory. First, encoding. We get information into our brains through a process called encoding, which is input of information into the memory system. Once we receive sensory information from the environment, our brains label or code it. We organize the information with other similar information and connect new concepts and existing concepts. Second, storage. Retaining information in the memory. Once the information has been encoded, we have to retain it. Our brains take the encoded information and place it in the storage. Storage is the creation of permanent record of information. Lastly, retrieval, finding memories. The act or getting information out of memory storage and back into conscious awareness is known as retrieval. The information is brought back at the appropriate time and reactivate for use on the current task and show measure of effective memory. three-stage of information processing theory. First, sensory memory, or first stage of storage. In the Atkinson-Sheffrin model, stimuli from the environment are processed first in the sensory memory. Storage in the brief sensory event such as sight, sound, and taste. It is very brief storage up to a couple of seconds. We are constantly boomeranged with sensory information. We cannot absorb all of it or even most of it, and most of it has no impact to our lives. The capacity of it in our minds receive a great amount of information, but it is more what our minds can hold or perceive. The duration of the sensory registered only holds the information for extremely brief in the order of 1 to 3 seconds. Short-term memory or working memory, second stage of storage. In a temporary storage system that processes incoming sensory, memory. Sometimes it is called working memory. Short-term memory storage lasts about 2 seconds. Short-term memory maintains information for a limited time until the learner has adequate resources to process the information or until the information is forgotten. Long-term memory, third and final stage of storage. In the continuous storage of information. Unlike short-term memory, the storage capacity of long-term memory has no limits. It encompasses all the things you can remember that happened more than just a few minutes ago to all of the things that you can remember that happened days, weeks, and years ago. Also, we must know forgetting. It wasn't locked in. As we just learned, our brain must some work, effortful processing to encode information and move it in short-term and ultimately long-term memory. This has strong implications for our students, as it can impact their learning. If one doesn't work to encode and store information, it will likely to be likely be forgotten. Research indicates that people forget 80% of what they learn only a day later. When you learn something new, the goal is to lock it in sooner rather than later and move it from short-term memory to long-term memory, where it can be accessed when you need it, like at the end of the semester for your final exam or maybe year from now. This is an example of information processing model of learning. Thank you for joining me today, and mm, hopefully this learning can help me in the future. Again, thank you for watching.